Imagine a respected samurai kneeling before a small shrine, alone, at midnight. His armor is removed, revealing scars, both physical and emotional. Tears stream down his face as he whispers, "I can't do this anymore. I hate being good." This powerful scene begins our exploration of moral slavery and the exhaustion that comes from living for others' approval. If you've ever felt the weight of being the reliable one, the nice one, the good one, this story might feel like looking in a mirror. The Hollow Hero, when goodness becomes a prison. What if the most dangerous person in your life is the one you see in the mirror each morning, not because they wish you harm, but because they've trapped you in a prison of perpetual goodness? Meet Takeshi, a samurai renowned throughout his province. Each day before dawn, he rises to patrol the village borders. By midday, he's helped farmers with their harvests. By evening, he's mediated disputes between merchants. The villagers bow deeply when he passes. Mothers point him out to their children. Elders thank the gods for sending such a protector. Yet behind Takeshi's perfect posture lies a terrible secret. As he kneels each night in his sparse quarters, a hollow ache spreads through his chest. His acts of service, once filled with purpose, now feel mechanical, like a puppet's movements. The smiles he offers feel painted on his face. The gratitude he receives no longer touches his heart. "Thank you, Honorable Takeshi," a merchant had said that morning, after he'd spent hours recovering stolen goods. Takeshi had nodded graciously, while an unfamiliar voice inside whispered, "What if I had simply walked away?" His reputation follows him like a shadow, one that has grown too large, too demanding. Each heroic deed adds another expectation, another bar to the invisible cage that surrounds him. They need him to be their perfect protector, their flawless moral compass. And Takeshi has forgotten how to be anything else. The physical toll of this moral slavery manifests in ways Takeshi cannot ignore. His sleep is fractured by nightmares, where he drowns in an ocean of outstretched hands. He wakes with jaw pain from grinding his teeth, chronic tension headaches that bloom behind his eyes, and a persistent fatigue that no amount of rest seems to cure. His body carries the weight of his fragmenting identity. This phenomenon, what psychologists now call moral burnout, emerges when our actions and our authentic needs become disconnected. Takeshi's exhaustion comes not from physical exertion, but from the constant pressure to meet others' expectations, while abandoning his own. By day, Takeshi is the embodiment of selflessness, his movements precise and confident. By night, he's a broken man who stares at his reflection in a bowl of water and barely recognizes himself. Two selves living in one body, the perfect hero and the resentful prisoner, never permitted to integrate. Your worth is determined by your service. His father had told him when he was only 7, after Takeshi had hesitated to sacrifice his meal to a hungry stranger. A samurai exists for others, never for himself. This lesson embedded itself deep within Takeshi's developing mind. His childhood became a training ground, not just for combat, but for the suppression of his own desires. Every approving nod from his father, when he denied himself, became the foundation of his identity. Now, 20 years later, Takeshi stands amid a festival thrown in his honor. Lanterns illuminate the village square as performers reenact his most famous acts of heroism. Children wear masks painted to look like him. The village elder presents him with a ceremonial sword, its handle inlaid with precious stones. "This man embodies virtue itself," the elder proclaims, as the crowd erupts in cheers. But inside Takeshi's chest, something is breaking. As he accepts the sword with a perfect bow, his hands tremble slightly. No one notices. They see only what they expect to see. Behind his eyes, for the first time, a dangerous thought forms fully. I could leave tonight and never return. The realization washes over him like cold water. His goodness has become a form of slavery. Not because virtue itself is a prison, but because his actions stem from fear, not choice. He performs goodness not from authentic virtue, but from terror of rejection. The approval of others has become his master, and Takeshi has become the most dedicated servant. 3 days later, Takeshi kneels at a remote mountain shrine, the ceremonial sword laid before him. He has come seeking answers, though he doesn't know what questions to ask. The weight of his resentment feels like a betrayal of everyone who believes in him. How can he be both the hero they need and the man he truly is? As dusk settles over the shrine, Takeshi becomes aware of another presence. A monk stands in the shadows, watching him with eyes that seem to pierce through his perfect facade. Interesting, the monk says, though Takeshi has spoken no words. You wear your goodness like armor, yet it wounds you more deeply than any enemy's blade ever could. The monk's mirror, confronting the shadow self. Your goodness was never meant to be a prison, the monk continued, settling beside Takeshi with unsettling familiarity. His weathered face showed no judgment as he examined the samurai, not as a legendary hero, but as a man at war with himself. A war where both victory and defeat would require a form of courage Takeshi had never practiced. Tell me, the monk said, leaning forward, do you serve because you choose to, or because you fear what happens if you don't? Takeshi's hands tightened around his knees. No one had ever questioned his motives before. The village accepted his goodness as natural, inevitable, like the rising sun or falling rain. I serve because it is right, Takeshi answered automatically. Right according to whom? The monk's eyes narrowed. Have you ever considered that what you call virtue might be something else entirely? In the philosophy of Nietzsche, he continued, there exists a troubling concept that might explain your inner conflict. A form of morality born not from strength, but from weakness. The monk described how slave morality inverts the values of the strong, praising meekness and humility, while condemning strength and assertion. This inversion creates a moral landscape, he said, where your true nature becomes your enemy. You've adopted values not based on what you truly believe, but on what others want from you. Takeshi felt a flicker of anger. Are you suggesting virtue is wrong? I'm suggesting your goodness is not virtue at all, but a sophisticated form of cowardice, the monk replied, his words sharper than any blade Takeshi had faced. You fear your own power and the responsibility of authentic choice. You fear disappointing others more than you fear betraying yourself. The words landed like physical blows. Takeshi wanted to deny them, yet something resonated deep within him, a truth he had always known, but never acknowledged. By suppressing your darker impulses, the monk continued, you've cut yourself off from your full humanity. These shadow aspects, your anger, resentment, selfish desires, they're not flaws to eliminate, but essential parts of who you are. Without them, you remain half a person, performing half a life. The monk rose and motioned for Takeshi to follow him to a small clearing. Let's try something different, he said. I want you to stand here and shout no as loudly as you can. Takeshi hesitated, feeling foolish. When was the last time you refused someone? The monk pressed. When did you last set a boundary that honored your needs instead of sacrificing for others? Psychological research, the monk explained, showed that individuals who suppress their authentic selves often experience increased anxiety and depression. Exactly what Takeshi had been feeling. The pressure to conform creates a cycle of self-neglect, exacerbating feelings of inadequacy and isolation. Over the next several days, the monk guided Takeshi through unconventional exercises. Some days they sat in silence. Other days, the monk asked Takeshi to name desires he had buried, to speak aloud the thoughts he considered unworthy. Each admission felt like removing a stone from a dam, until emotions began flowing that Takeshi hadn't felt in decades. There is a profound difference, the monk explained one evening, between kindness born from strength versus kindness born from fear. Authentic kindness stems from self-awareness and confidence, a conscious choice made with full agency. What you've practiced is performative kindness that arises from a desire for approval, leading to the resentment and conflict you now feel. The monk demonstrated this difference through stories that challenged conventional morality. He spoke of a farmer who refused to share his crop during famine, not from selfishness, but because he knew preserving seed would save more lives the following year. He described a teacher who allowed a student to fail, not from cruelty, but because the student needed to face consequences to grow. These acts appear unkind on the surface, the monk noted, but emerge from a deeper understanding and authentic choice. As days passed, Takeshi began acknowledging aspects of himself he'd long denied. His anger at constant demands, his desire for solitude, his resentment toward the very people who praised him. To his surprise, the monk welcomed these admissions without judgment. True virtue, the monk explained, comes not from denying our darker impulses, but from consciously choosing our actions, with full awareness of all aspects of ourselves. The integrated self acts with purpose, not from programming. As dawn broke over the mountain shrine, Takeshi made his choice. He walked back to the village, not as its perfect protector, but as a man embracing his whole self. Standing before the gathered villagers, he returned the ceremonial sword and spoke his truth, that he could no longer serve from emptiness. The paradox of authentic goodness revealed itself in that moment. By disappointing those who expected his sacrifice, Takeshi performed perhaps his most moral act. His boundaries created space for genuine connection, rather than resentful service. As philosophers have noted, setting boundaries is essential for maintaining authenticity. It allows individuals to prioritize their own needs and values, leading to healthier interactions. True virtue, Takeshi discovered, was never about flawless obedience to external expectations. It emerges when we integrate both light and shadow into conscious choice, when we confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our relationships. The question now echoes for us: are we good because we've chosen to be, or because we're afraid of what happens if we stop? The difference between authentic goodness and performative virtue may be the most important distinction we ever make. One leads to resentment and disconnection, the other to a profound sense of self-worth. What kind of goodness lives in you?